All right, now this is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, I suggest you go back and watch that. It was just too much information. I couldn't cut any of it out. I felt it was all valuable, and I hope you guys find it valuable. I hope you find it useful, and above all else, I hope it's something that prevents you from falling victim to the same pitfalls that other businesses have found themselves in. So let's jump into it. How is it that some massive companies in the meal prep industry end up just going out of business, seemingly overnight sometimes? They look like they've got everything going for them, and yet they're gone in an instant. Well, in today's episode, we're going to discuss some of the reasons that some of these businesses end up failing and give you some ideas to think about so that you can see what's coming around the corner and hopefully prevent finding yourself in the same pitfalls that they've suffered. What's going on, eaters and feeders? My name is Casey, and on my channel, I discuss business tips and tricks, startup hacks, entrepreneur mindset, and so much more based on my experience starting Florida's highest rated meal prep company from nothing. No experience, no funding, no connections. So if you're interested in learning more about marketing, production, leadership, software, and so much more, I invite you to subscribe, turn on those alert notifications, and check out the links in the show notes because I don't want you missing out on any of my content. I produce videos weekly. I go live sporadically. I've got content through those links and on my website, mealprepbiz101.com, that you won't find on YouTube. And if you're interested in this video and my other videos, I think you're definitely going to dig that other stuff that I have. I've got a free ebook. I've got free boot camps. I've got one-on-one consulting. I've got private groups. I've got free software that will run your entire meal prep business, as well as exclusive videos that won't be found on YouTube. I've got calculators, tools, all sorts of stuff. I highly suggest you check out the links in the show notes and mealprepbiz101.com. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's jump into today's episode.
Welcome to our channel where we go behind the scenes for meal plan company Fit Food Fresh and other local businesses across South Florida. Make sure you hit the subscribe and alerts so you never miss a video, and hit us with any questions or suggestions.
Now, another thing that's going to tie into a lot of this, ties into the last thing, is increasing your costs. As you grow, obviously, you're going to need more bodies to get the job done. You're going to need more people in the kitchen. You're going to need more drivers. You're going to need more people answering the phones. So let's say you've got that successful marketing campaign that I was talking about before, and for some reason that dwindles. And now you've got this bigger overhead because you got into a bigger space. You got more equipment. You outlaid all this cash. You created all these commitments for your spend, and now the acquisition isn't where you expected it to be. You're not growing at the same rate. Now what happens? Well, it's a lot easier to scale a business up than it is to scale it down. Let's say you've got 150 staff, and this is a real situation. I'm not going to say any companies' names. I've actually got 2 videos in mind that I will discuss. 2 specific businesses. I will mention them by name. I'm going to work on those videos, and I'm going to try to give them a fair shakedown, do some more research on what exactly went wrong beyond what I've heard went wrong. But hopefully those business owners are going to be willing to talk to me. But I know some businesses have gone up. They've got hundreds of employees, and now they have a decrease in business by hundreds or thousands of members because certain marketing campaigns stopped working, or there was for whatever reason. We'll get to the other reasons later, but the general idea is you've now got X amount of dollars in salary. Scaling that down isn't always easy. You've got bigger rent. You move into a bigger facility. You moved into this 20,000 square foot, 30,000, 60,000 square foot facility, something massive. You can't go to your landlord and say, hey, business is a little slow. Could I just have 40,000 square feet instead of that 60,000 square feet? Can I just cut it in half? I'm going through a slow season, going through the holidays, whatever it is. That doesn't work like that. Your employees, let's say you got a team, a massive team of people, a bunch of different teams. If you start laying people off, there's a lot of things to consider. One, are you laying off somebody who does certain tasks that won't be covered by the remaining team? Another thing to consider, what is the existing team going to be feeling like when they start seeing their coworkers laid off, especially when it's people who are doing their job? When you have salaried employees and your income goes down and you have to start laying people off, hopefully you're never in that situation. Just hopefully you put this in your mind so you prevent finding yourself in that situation, and understand that there are businesses who have had to lay off people who were doing everything correctly. But unfortunately, that was in a sales position. So a lot of times sales positions will be one of the last positions cut because that's more directly correlated with acquisition and income. It's easier to figure out how much a salesman is worth because you can see how many deals they're able to sign. But when you've got a salaried person in the kitchen and you're sitting there going, okay, well, that's 45 grand a year. That's 50 grand a year right there. Let me get rid of that person. I'll just give that person a little bit more of their job and then spread out a couple of their tasks to this person and this person. These other people are going to be like, man, that person was always doing their job and they're gone. So what security do I have? Because maybe I'm not even as good as them, or maybe I'm as good as them, but I still don't feel like my employer values me. It's going to scare them, and you might end up having people quit. We've had people come to our company after they've seen the writing on the wall. There's a company down here, not going to mention any names. They still are in existence. I don't know the full story of what led to their demise, but I know they went up and they started coming down, and they had a series of Fridays. I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks in a row. And I heard like one of the Fridays was 40 people had to be cut. That's a lot. They had hundreds of employees at this point. 40 people cut on one Friday. I think 30 people had to be cut the next Friday. That's heartbreaking. That's horrible. You're disrupting people's lives. I mean, there's stuff beyond the business that, like, as a business owner, you should feel that weight of your decisions. You shouldn't be cavalier about, let's just cut 10 people. Eeny, meeny, miny. You shouldn't ever be comfortable with doing that. It should be a hard decision for you to make, and you should do everything in your power to avoid having to make that decision. And I'm not going to fault any business owners or entrepreneurs who have found themselves in that position. Again, I don't know their backstory. I'm not going to judge them. I empathize for them for having to be in that position. Hopefully they did what they honestly thought was best and not just what they thought was best for their wallet. But in any case, the idea is scalability works easier in one way than the other way. So when you find yourself in those positions, okay, now let's go through that hypothetical. I've had to lay some people off. Now I've got other people who are jumping ship. They're coming to companies like mine who, they know, everyone knows people. People in the, kitchen industry, in the food industry know each other. So when they hear this company is stable and my company's laying people off, these weren't even people who got laid off yet. We had people quitting this company because they saw people getting laid off, and they're just like, okay, that's a lot. Oh wow, another week, another Friday, another several dozen people. Okay, like I gotta get my application out. I gotta go somewhere else. I got rent. I've got car payments. I've got mouths to feed. I'm not waiting around for this guy to come up and surprise me with a, we'll let you know when season comes back. It doesn't work like that. People can't put their bills on hold waiting for season to come back. You might lose some people who are great people who are integral to your business, and they're not going to come back. So again, scalability tends to work in one direction, not the other. Another consideration is the food quality. As you grow, there's a lot of variables. I mean, you're making a perishable item. So one of the situations, and there's a bunch, but let's say you're able to make the food as good as you were making it at half the size. You've doubled, you've tripled, you've quadrupled. Let's pretend the food is still as good, but let's say now the refrigerator that's cooling the food isn't able to cool it as fast, so the food's staying in the danger zone a bit longer. It's growing all sorts of nasty stuff, getting people sick. Maybe, the perishability is now exacerbated. You're losing several days. People are opening it a day after they received it and it stinks. Maybe the same day they received it and it stinks. People are like, all these bad things can happen even when the food is on point. But also, the food being on point is another issue, because let's say you've got different people making the sauce because you've had to grow, and they haven't been trained as effectively as the person who was making it before, who was making it for several years as you were growing, and they had it down pat, and the taste changes. Maybe they're doing it right, but the taste is just a little bit different, and you lose people because of that. There's a bunch of variables. Despite your best efforts, that you need to consider. So you have to have your systems in place. You have to have your recipes in place. You have to have your training procedures in place to make sure that it's as replicatable as possible. It has to be a system. It can't be some, eyeballed kind of thing where it's like, oh, we put a little bit of this and I put a little bit of that. It's like, well, how much is this times 5? Because now we've grown 5x and we're doing 5 times as many meals. So how much is this? A lot of companies kind of start with this, and we were at that stage with the first few chefs that we hired. We didn't know what to expect, and they'd never run an operation like that. They're used to working in a restaurant where this is what you do because you're making a meal or two at a time. Now when you're making hundreds or thousands of meals at a time, this stuff changes. All the numbers change, the taste changes. So there's a lot of variables that you have to consider, even with the same person making that meal, let alone having someone new come in who's maybe lower skilled, even the same amount of skill. They're just not used to making that recipe. So the flavor changes. And that, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, saying that this is all like the best case scenario. Maybe you have someone who's completely incompetent and they're burning the food and you're losing food costs, or you're sending out bad food and you're just losing people left and right because you don't have your procedures down. Another thing is customer service quality. Maybe, because of the complaint of the bad food that you're receiving, the new customer service person who's a new hire doesn't have all the rebuttals down, doesn't know how the company operates. Maybe you don't know how they operate, and they're not as tempered as you'd wish they would be, and maybe they're not delivering the same customer service. I could go on and on. Sales. Maybe you've hired some new salespeople and they're dead weight. They're burning through leads because they can't close like the other people because you rushed to hire them and you didn't train them. All of this comes down, when it comes down to personnel, it comes down to making this a system, making it replicatable, just like a recipe. You don't do it off of memory and get used to making it for 4 portions and then try to scale it up to 40 or 400 portions. You have to have this stuff down. And it's something that a lot of people don't think about. They just focus on growth. They focus on acquisition. They focus on getting bigger and bringing that money in because money solves all your problems, right? No, unfortunately it doesn't. Having a system in place for your production, for your customer service, training, systems, whatever you want to call it, for your sales, all of this has to be a procedure that's well defined, easy for people to learn. There's no gaps in what they're told. Because I don't know if you guys have had this, I've done this in 2 different classes, one in a speech class and one in, I think like a English class, where you had to write out the instructions for making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Really simple, right? Well, the teacher, the instructor, the professor, whoever would then follow your instructions word for word, or they'd pull up somebody else from the class and they would follow just your instructions word for word. And this is very applicable to working with software developers and programmers as well. But you'd have an instruction on there like grab the knife. They'd grab it by the blade end. And then your next instruction is stick the knife in the peanut butter. And you didn't tell them to take the jar lid off. So now professor or whoever's like, you failed. I'm not making, and because then your instructions go on and they failed at the really basic stuff. So you have to have a system in place. I know that's not, I think it's a good example. I know it's a little bit hyperbolic, but understand that if you have a process in place, there's no excuse for that person not being able to do their job. And that goes to delivery drivers as well. You have to tell them that when they're delivering a bag at 3 a.m., never knock. Don't call the person to figure out where their apartment is. Call your logistics manager. Don't let the door on the gate slam. Don't let the screen door slam. Don't rev up your engine. Like all these things that seem like they're common sense and the stuff that you didn't have to tell the previous drivers. You have to have that stuff in place, and you have to have that stuff, like I said, as easily replicatable as possible, because these are the things that will end up biting you in the ass and losing you clients. And the worst thing is the reputation, the hit to the reputation, because when you grow and you're exposed to a bigger audience and you start failing to meet those expectations, not only are you losing money because you're still paying the same for marketing and all of your other overhead expenses, but now you've got more people who are witnessing these mistakes that you're making. There's a higher likelihood of them ending up on Yelp or some review site, which is going to make it even harder for you to acquire people. It's going to make it easier for people to quit the program, because as soon as they They might get on you when you're like, okay, they're at 4 stars. I see some complaints about the delivery. I see some complaints about the food, but I'll give them a shot. As soon as they see any of that stuff show up, they're going to be right on Yelp. So not only are you going to be losing money, you're going to be losing a client, you're going to be losing future clients who aren't going to call you and give you the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, I saw your 3-star on Yelp, but you mind explaining your side of the story? Because I might. No, they're not going to call you. They're going to go to the 5-star company. That's why we've been so successful, is we've grown slowly and strategically. In the beginning of our business, we grew rapidly, but it's different to grow at 30% month over month when you're going from 10 to 20. Like you're dealing with dozens of people. If you were to grow at 30% in a month when you have 500 people, that's 150 extra people. That might be sustainable, but that's going to be some more people in the kitchen probably. That's going to be some more routes, which means you need more drivers, which means you're probably also going to need at least one more customer service person. So these are all things that require training, and I keep going back to having a system in place. You need to have a system in place. Another thing, and this kind of relates to your overhead and the expenses that you're laying out and scaling up, but the investments and the expenses that you take on. One big thing that I've got other videos that I've discussed why it's a bad idea, but getting a fleet of vehicles. A lot of meal prep companies think they need these branded vehicles to be doing their delivery. And there's a bunch of reasons why you don't need that stuff, and I cover that in another video, so check it out there. I won't waste your time. This video is going to be long enough as it is. But those are all leases or car payments that you're going to have now. That's all a monthly commitment that you're going to be shelling out. Now, when you don't need those vehicles, you're still paying for the insurance, you're still paying for the rent. Heaven forbid somebody hits somebody with one of your company vehicles, because now you got to pay for the repairs, possibly get sued. There's a whole bunch of problems that comes with that. And I am saying don't get vehicles. I think getting the company vehicles for a meal prep business doesn't make any sense. I've seen other people do it. They think it makes sense. I've never been convinced. Do what you want, but I would strongly suggest you don't do it, because that's another thing that I've seen other companies do. They outlay this money. It ends up being a headache. I won't say that it will kill your business to start buying or leasing vehicles, but it doesn't help. More expenses, again related to previous stuff, is poorly managed marketing campaign. This is a combination of taking your eyes off the ball, but a lot of laziness, seems to rear its head and come out of the woodwork when companies get to a certain level. And like I said, the owners are driving Lambos, they are delegating a lot of stuff, outsourcing a lot of stuff, and now you're dealing with a marketing company who maybe doesn't care, or maybe you've got some staff marketers who, their salary, it's hard to tie their compensation in based on their performance. And if you're not watching them, if you don't have people who care about the business making these crucial decisions, and there's money going out, how many months are you going to waste throwing money into a marketing company that doesn't work because people aren't really putting their heart into it? You're not looking at the reports, you're not looking at the performance, you're not trying different things. Again, a lot of these companies get stuck in a rut. They attribute, their previous success to their intelligence, not luck, and they just assume if they keep going about it the same way, they're going to continue making the same success pop out of thin air, and it's not always the case. Other companies, another mistake I've seen is you try to extend beyond your delivery zone too quickly. There's a lot of headaches that come into that. Again, I got another video on that. But if you're paying more money to basically go past, there's always someone else in your area who you can turn into a customer. Sometimes, yes, you might saturate the area. I've never seen anybody saturate an area really, unless you're in a super niche where you're doing like, FODMAP, vegan, halal food, and it's like all these, it's such a super niche. Maybe there's not enough people in your city to sustain you. But unless you're living in a really small town, a lot of us could probably survive and have a very healthy business just staying in our city. We're in 4 counties. So there's plenty of people down here. That's why we don't ship, because I look at it as paying more money. Not saying it doesn't make sense, but not right now when there's still so many people down here with money who would be buying our product that we could be servicing. You're extending your reach. You're paying to drive past people who would love to be your client. Instead, you're extending your reach and bringing in more people for a much larger expense. And there's different expenses that are incurred when you're shipping further out. The boxes, the cold element, the installation, the shipping, all that stuff, it all changes versus maybe your model where you had in-house delivery, you're working with a local courier. And these are variables that aren't always thought of and factored in when people do this rush for money. Again, they focus on acquisition, they focus on bringing more money in. You bring more money in and you have more money going out, it doesn't always make sense. If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. You gotta make sure that these moves are profitable. There's one company I'm gonna discuss in more detail in another episode who is shipping to Vegas from Florida. And this is actually, they were on a TV show, and it's a great lesson. I'll talk about it more in the next episode. But they were shipping to one person in Vegas. I know another company in a little bit north of us in Florida, and I discussed this in another video as well, who is paying like $80 to ship to, I think, Wisconsin. And they had one CrossFit person in Wisconsin who was eating the food for free, by the way, who wasn't even bringing them members. They were not thinking, the business owners were not looking at the numbers, and they weren't thinking about the cost of what they were doing. They weren't thinking about the results that they were getting. They were just sponsoring athletes blindly, and this is something I've warned you about in other videos. Again, a lot of this stuff is stuff you've heard before probably, if you've been watching me long enough. And they're just focused on, well, if there's athletes eating our food and they're posting about it on Instagram, then of course more people are going to come in. Well, are they? 3 months this guy's been on your food, this guy or gal. You're giving them free food. You're paying to ship out of state to get those clients. You're not getting anybody in Wisconsin. What are they bringing? How are you tracking this? Are you watching your numbers? A lot of these themes are the same. Hubris is the biggest thing. If it was one word, why these big companies fail, hubris. They assume that their previous success is going to be replicatable and provide them future success. They assume that the decisions they're making are the best decisions. They're not listening to a sounding board. They're not listening to critics. They're not thinking about changing stuff enough. And these are all detrimental to your businesses. One of the most dangerous things is mistaking your luck for talent. I want you to remember that. All right, I feel like I've beat you guys up enough. Again, for more content, make sure you've subscribed, you've got those alert notifications on, you've checked out the links in the notes, and you're on Meal Prep Biz 101. Sign up for a membership, gain access to all the stuff that I don't have on YouTube. Again, I've got more content planned related to this. I'm going to talk about 2 specific businesses who were huge. They were national. One had multiple kitchens, and then one day their employees showed up to locked doors. And I really hope I can prevent you guys from doing that. It's a horrible experience to have, I'm sure. And that's all I've got for you. So until next time, thank you so much for your time and attention. I do value it. I look forward to helping you grow as a business, as an entrepreneur, and as an individual.